Welcome to Talk to Me Tuesday on a Tuesday. I'm your host, Madi B. And today we have a special show. Today's going to be a continuation show to one of the shows we had at the beginning of this month in honor of Black History Month. Wow, that show, if you guys were on it, it was a success. We had a lot of great points that were being talked about on the history and the Black culture and really honoring what this day means to us. So that's when we were educating you guys, our colleagues, about Black history. So now we decided to open up the lines of communication for an open dialogue. And today we're going to be talking on open dialogue on race, ethnicity, and the perspective in this country in regards to Black History Month. I have a lot of strong men and women that are on our panel today, and they're really going to give us their perspective, their opinion, and also share a little bit about their feelings about these topics and how and what we can do to begin the healing process in our African American culture in today's world. Now, another thing I want you guys to keep in mind, today is 2/22/22. It's a special day. The number 2 is usually associated with harmony, balance, and consideration of love. So I want to have those type of emotions channel in through today's show as we recognize that this is going to be very difficult and deep topics. So I want to go ahead and introduce our panel today. Without further ado, we have a lot of panel members. So I'm going to start off with you guys introducing yourselves, your name, a little bit about yourself, but most importantly, what does Black History Month mean to you? We'll start with Jerry.
My name is Jerry. I'm working here, of course, at Miller and Associates law firm. Black History Month means a lot to me. It's a very motivating time of the year for myself, and I'm always looking forward to it.
Awesome. Misty.
As you guys know, I'm Misty Whitfield. I was on the last show with before. From Louisiana, raised in Texas, working here at Miller and Associates law firm for the last 3 years. Love everything about Black History Month. As I said before, I love it. I love talking about it. I love posting it. And I'm interested in seeing what we talk about today.
Awesome. Lorne, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Everybody, I'm Lorne Patterson, again, returning with Misty for the continuation of our last Black History Month episode. Again, just being excited for the conversation, the dialogue. Black History Month, yes, it's for the month of February, but as we continue to have these type of moments, we can continue to build the conversation so that it can extend beyond February and we can start to really see more impactful change within our communities.
Well said. Now, Jazmin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jazmin. I'm currently an intake specialist here at DMA. I've been here for a short time, but I've enjoyed every second of it. Black History Month is very special to me because I feel that this is a time for us to appreciate Black culture and for other races and ethnicities to know about our history and also appreciate it with us.
Nice. Thank you. And lastly, I'm going to go to Attorney Rochelle Guiton.
Hi, Madi. Thanks for having me. So I'm Rochelle Guiton. I'm an attorney here at the firm. Black History Month for me is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for all of us to be intentional about, recognizing the achievements, the struggles, the civil rights movements, and all the things that we've, been able to endure and overcome as African Americans, and being intentional about making sure that we educate the people around us, have productive conversations with the people around us, to engage in those conversations so that we can continue to make things better, right? So, I like I said, I think that it's a great opportunity for us to continue making strides in our country with regards to, making everyone equal in all aspects.
Yes. And look, I just want to thank all of you guys from the bottom of my heart for having you guys here as a panel. You guys are all beautiful people, men, women. and all kinds of shades and races and ethnicities that we're going to kind of talk about today. So I want to thank you ahead of time for allowing us to get deep, to have that open dialogue, and to talk about some of these topics that are important, and to have that opportunity, just like Attorney Rochelle Guiton said. So I'm going to start off with Jazmin. I know you have some quick facts about Black History Month that you want to share with us, like how it even came about. So where did you find out about this?
I was doing a bit of research and I actually found out that Carter G. Woodson actually created a Negro History Month in 1926. And then some years later in 1976, President Gerald Ford actually officially sorry, he officially recognized Black History Month in 1976. And so even today, other countries like Canada and the UK, they also celebrate Black History with us, with Canada celebrating it in February with us, and in the UK, they celebrate it in October.
Nice. So look, we're very happy and proud that others are also celebrating this movement and what this month means to them. But remember, some of us are African American for all year round. So this is something we want to celebrate every single day, not just recognizing it in 28 days, right? That's too short. So that's why we want to kind of start this movement for the future, right? We might come back and just keep having these deep conversations. And I want you guys that are watching to let us know if this is something that you want to be a part of, something you want to watch. So we're going to go ahead and get started and talk about first the civil rights movement that played a huge part in our history. So Lorne, I want you to kind of tell us a little bit about the civil rights movements then, and even how it's presenting itself in today's world.
Again, I think one of the main things that we always talk about when we discuss civil rights, when we talk about advocates and we talk about different individuals who've been pioneers in the movement, we always talk about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we always talk about Malcolm X, we talk about Sigmund the Truth, we talk about W.E.B. Du Bois. We go through all of these famous leaders, right? Activists, writers, they've been influential when it comes to communities, when it comes to policies. And I think that we've been able to do a great job of maintaining that consistency. I think when you talk about current movements, Black Lives Matter, when you talk about other local cities, local areas, that are going against voter squashing rights or preventing individuals from having access to certain programs, I think we become more vigilant now that we have more accesses and more technology, but I still think we have to be innovative. We have to be creative. We have to constantly keep our finger on the pulse. We have to still be in the community because there's so many moving pieces, right? We have so many opportunities for growth and conversation. And I think that if you think about where our previous leaders, African-American leaders, where they saw those opportunities to really step out, and really make themselves irreplaceable. They made themselves, a staple. We have to have that same mentality. We can't take no for an answer. We have to make sure that when people see Black Lives Matter, they know that it's important, that it's something that can't be removed. They have to know that everything we do, it's going towards the greater good and equality for all of us.
Yeah, look, you mentioned Black Lives Matter. That's one of the movements that was a year and a half ago that we all kind of lived through. And right now we have a lot of us, our viewers, that have a listening ear and that are willing to listen and to have the conversation. Now, Rochelle, I kind of want to turn this over to you. It's important. The perspective that I want to bring up, I would like to talk about is how do you think the children felt during that time? Now, some of those children during the Martin Luther King era are our family members today, our uncles, our fathers, maybe even our grandfathers. So I want you to kind of talk about what the effect on the children is, because as of today, I've seen little kids wearing those shirts that saying Black Lives Matter. So give us some feedback on your view.
Sure. Madi, I have a lot of strong feelings on this topic. And it's one of the reasons that I very strongly feel that African-American children are forced to grow up faster than our non-African-American counterparts. Let's take, for example, Ruby Bridges. She was the first African-American child to desegregate an all-white school in Louisiana. She was 6 years old. That would have been back in 1960, which is not that long ago. right? And so she's really young. And if you really just let's think about what that must have been like for her, having to be the first and only African-American student to walk into an all-white school and have, a crowd of angry white Americans yelling, maybe spitting, yelling profanities, and what that would have been like, and what position her parents would have been in to prepare her for that, and how they would have had to educate her and make sure that, she, I would tell my kids, listen, you don't listen to a word they're saying, you're worthy and you're valued, and the type of affirmations that you have to daily tell your African-American child so that they're not believing, what racist America is saying about them. And so, like I said, I have a lot of strong feelings about that. And if you take that into today's world, even for myself with 3 kids and 2 sons, having to educate them and prepare them for the world that they're walking into. And not that the world is not making a lot of progression and a lot of major changes, because we have that. And we're so thankful for the changes that we have, from Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and even today with the voter rights and things like that are making huge advancements for African Americans. But I still have to be realistic for my children, and hopefully for anyone that's watching, to educate. And so sometimes, it creates apprehensions in us. We're on heightened alert, even in situations where it may not be necessary. So that's bad for both sides. It's another form of PTSD. Even if you think back in times of segregation, if you had a child that may not have experienced the personal racism themselves and been yelled at or injured or called racist names, but they had to watch their parent be dehumanized, and what that must have felt like. This is a really strong, deep topic for me. And I think that gets passed on from generation to generation. My parents did not send me into the world blindly. I knew that as a child, what it was like and what that history meant. It's embedded in us. And I think I assume a lot of our panel would probably say the same, that we grow up understanding what that history meant and where we've come from.
Yeah, I want to turn it over to the panel. Rochelle, you put a lot of great points on the table right now that we all could probably relate to. And so I want to kind of turn it over, especially Jerry, Misty, if you guys have any feedback on, what it's doing to our kids, or even put yourself when you were the kid, if it had any impact on you when you were that child.
Absolutely. I agree with Rochelle, like she said, it's a big reason why people like myself and other people like me, have a chip on their shoulder, from growing up in those situations. It turns you into a person who's always trying to, get away from it, So with everything that you want to do, you want to be good at it, you want to be great, you want to be extra competitive, you want to be, we know the rules, you have to be that good, you have to be extraordinary, you have to stand out, you have to, go the extra mile. And like she said, in some situations it's good and bad because, of course it causes friction both ways.
And for me, as I stated before, even though, I was born in Louisiana and raised in Texas, it still wasn't brought up in our household. But I grew up knowing the basics. Coming into my adulthood, it was kind of hard. It was really hard because I was a little darker than most Black people, and I was made fun of because of that. Not only that, because I was super skinny and I was tall, and it was really hard coming up. Versus now, I still go through some of them things, but it's a lot different. Some people understand what we're going through. Some people can relate because they have gone through those things too. So, I go through it like, not with a chip on my shoulder, but I keep my head raised high and my chest stuck out, because I want people to know that I'm strong and I can get past this. And even though that my relatives or my ancestors went through that, maybe I could, continue what they were doing. I'm not going to sit at the back of the bus, like Rosa Parks said. I'm not going to do this because I am just like you. I'm tired. I don't want to go back there. I want to be able to do things like that, to show others that, we can overcome this. We can move past this. There's always going to be history, but we need to make new memories now.
Exactly. And look, another part that you guys naturally just said right now, but also Rochelle mentioned, and I want to ask you guys is, once you go through certain things like this, it creates a PTSD. You have to give yourself words of affirmation. It could be a mental thing that we all go through, right? And that is powerful. So I want to ask you, do you guys wake up and have to give yourself, like what Misty and Jerry just said, hold your head up high, my chest out, I got this, you got to be competitive. Do you guys do that on a daily to kind of remind yourself, don't listen to the noise?
Absolutely. I feel like I would hope everyone does that, regardless of race, just to, to survive. But absolutely. Absolutely. I tell myself every day, like, you can't let up. You can't sleep too long. You can't afford to do this. You have to, sacrifice some time here. It's a fact.
Yeah. Awesome. And now, Rochelle, I kind of want to turn this one to you. Why is representation, identity, and diversity important for people to recognize?
Well, Madi, it's for all the reasons that we just talked about. So, for example, and I think it was Jerry that mentioned, waking up and having to believe that and knowing that you had to be better than everybody else. You've got to work harder. You've got to study harder. You've got to put in the long hours so that you make sure that you're recognized, right? And so when we have questions or conversations like the one that you just mentioned in having representation and inclusion, that's why it's important, because then I know I'm on a fair playing field. And I know that there are people in the boardroom sitting at the tables and making the decisions that are like-minded or like experienced, that can consider, what my attributes are and what I bring to the table and why it would be important to have in their company, their organizations, because we do bring things to the table, obviously, and, to be considered for those things and not dismissed. Sometimes it does take, us shifting the table and shifting the environment by making sure that we have adequate representation.
I love that. You use the powerful word shifting. I love that. And I want to see how you guys on the panel apply that. Lorne, I would like for you to add a little bit about your perspective on the same topic.
I think that is probably a conversation I have with myself every day too, about how can I shift the perspective of people that I encounter, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's at church, whether it's in community organizations. I know even me and Jerry have had conversations about the fact that as an African-American man, I have to work 10 times harder just naturally, going into the workplace. If I don't have a degree against a non-African-American counterpart, will they have an advantage over me because I don't have the certifications or the academia to make sure that my work experience is respected just as much? And I think that, Attorney Guiton brought up a very good point. The representation helps level the playing field. When companies know that African-American men can represent their firm, whether it's in marketing, whether it's in HR, whether it's in operations, and they bring the same impact as non-African-American counterparts, it makes them more equitable. They realize like, hey, we can source all over the place. We can pull people from all over the place. So for me, I have to remind myself, heavy is the head that wears the crown. I'm not just representing myself. I'm representing a group of young African-American men that are coming behind me that just need one person to hold the door open for them. So yes, I do have to be intentional about what I shift. I do have to be intentional about the conversations I have, because people are not always going to physically remember you, but they will remember your impact. And so if you shift their thought process, they're going to walk away from the table going, I need to find another person like this. And if they just so happen to look like this, I'm fine with that too, because it's across the board. It's fair across the board.
Yeah, that's very powerful. And I know I use this a lot, breaking ceilings. I know we've seen it a lot in our history recently, a year ago, within a couple months. Now, I want to ask each and every one of you, how important is it to each and every one of you to have diversity in the workplace? You guys are all right there. This panel is diverse, but I want to ask you, how important is it to you to have it in your workplace?
I actually specifically looked for companies who were very diverse. It was actually part of the reason why I decided to come and work at DMA, because the owner, the founder, Darren Miller, he is African American, and a lot of people who I work with are also African American. And I really appreciated that once I learned about that. And it just affects you as a person. It just makes you grow as an African American, because you're sharing these experiences, and then you can see other people experience the same thing with you.
Yes, I love that. And like Rochelle said, leveling out that playing field, being in the place where we all work, seeing people that you admire, attorneys, non-attorneys, having these positions, it's something that you're breaking through. You make your own destiny, right? And I think,
and not only that, Mighty, if I could just add that, we create the diverse, because that is one of the things that I'm most proud of about our firm, is that we are so diverse. So it's not just African Americans, it's extremely diverse. And this, just beautiful melting pot of creative ideas. And I love that. But it's also dynamic in that we make a statement in the work that we do, not just here in Texas, but across the country, in showing that you can have diversity, and it works. It works. That we, are able to pull in all, cases and do different things and be creative in our work and reach our goals. And I think to me, that's a huge just milestone in and of itself.
Yes, well said. Now, I kind of want to turn over the perspective in the page a little bit to more of a heavier topic. I want to talk a little bit about the difference between race and ethnicity. So I want to open it up to all of you guys to openly discuss race. What does this word mean to you, and how do you associate with it?
Okay, so with me, colorism is a thing for me. Like I said before, I was teased on because of how dark I was. It was horrible. I was bullied, talked about, beaten up the whole night, because, other African American kids were a lot lighter than me. I was teased on that. Even parents called me Blackie, all of that. Experienced it all. It's kind of a touchy subject for me, but that is something that I did experience as a kid growing up. In some forms, as an adult, no, because it's more, I wouldn't say more equal, but it's more equality now than it was back then. So I get treated fairly now. I have grown to love myself even more now because of my color. Before, I used to literally put bleach in my water as a kid to try to lighten my skin, because people would make fun of me for that. But now, as an adult, I love it. I love my Blackness, and we should all love our color, no matter men, woman, child. It doesn't matter. You should all love your color regardless of what it is.
Right. Well said. And look, I looked up the the definition, because sometimes we get these mixed up, right? So race is associated with biology and linked with physical characteristics such as skin color, hair texture, color of your eyes, all that good stuff. So now I want to ask you guys, ethnicity. What does this word mean to you guys?
It's more culture, pretty much kind of to me when I hear it, I hear of, kind of environmental, as far as like, where you're from, background, roots more so. That's what I hear when I hear the word.
Well said. You said roots. Ooh, that's powerful. We're going to talk a little bit about those roots. But, looking up at the definition, it's a culture, expression, and identification based on language, history, society, culture, origins, or even the nation. So there is this distinct difference between the two. And now I want to open up some deep questions for you guys.
And Marty, if I could, can I expound a little bit on what Misty mentioned? Because I actually have the I guess the polar opposite of what she talked about. So, when you talk about, so first of all, I hope that we're all proud of our African American heritage and proud of where we come from. It's ugly and it's brutal, but we're proud of it. But I also think that we put too much on color, right? And so if, we talk about the experiences that Misty had from being too dark, right, for, her community, there's the polar opposite of that for girls like me who were too light. And, it just goes to show how our society just puts too much on color. And I know that, we have race that, talks about our physical attributes and, your hair texture and, does she have good hair or bad hair or, things like that. And then our ethnicity, bringing in the diversity of our cultures, and our expressions, right, that come from, our communities and society. But it's hurtful, that we were so, or maybe even still are so concerned with the looks on the outside. And all of that stems from the years and years and years of racism, right? And the history over the hundreds of years of, a certain skin tone connotating to slavery, and not being human. And how still in today's day, as young as Misty is as a child, having to, coincide and work through that mentally and learning to love herself, from the inside out. So that just bothers me so much that, African Americans experience that on so many levels. And still as adults, question, where we come from and how we got to where we are. And I just had to just kind of share my thoughts on that.
Yes, I agree. And look, I want to ask any of you guys, what are your thoughts of that? It's almost like there's racism within the race, right? So what are y'all's thoughts? Anyone in the panel that wants to elaborate on that?
Well, like to kind of touch on, both to the question and what they both just said, I believe it was designed that way. This is something that was forced. This was placed in place, to do the things that it has caused both of them, to experience that. Like she said, like Rochelle stated, as far as, going back to slavery, with the colors, it was made to seem that one was superior than the other one. Literally, when you have the same race of people living in the same exact conditions, and you have one that has a little bit better perks just because they're a little bit lighter. And like Rochelle stated earlier about things being passed down, through generations and generations, that's exactly what it is. Just certain things that, bad and good, have been passed down, through all of us, unfortunately, and it still happens to this day, all of those things we're still experiencing with. Of course, they've gotten better, but I feel like it's just, designed that way. This is what the system does.
Yeah. And something else that Rochelle, you mentioned is generational too, right? It's passed down. So we have to find a way within ourselves is how do we break that generational curse, right? So it doesn't keep passing down. What is y'all's thoughts about what Jerry said, what Misty said, and even Rochelle in regards to culture, race, and ethnicity?
Good.
I do feel, well, as far as like the whole generational racism kind of thing goes, I feel that in order to break the gap or to end that is to keep educating ourselves about the history and why we are the way we are and why we're treated the way we are. And we have to go out and make things happen within ourselves, within our community. And at the same time, it has to reach all the way up into the higher levels, the government and systemic racism and things like that. So I think it starts with us breaking that cycle so that our future generations don't have to go through that and they can live with that innate sense of we are not inferior or superior to anyone, but we are equal to everyone.
Yes, well said. And I know you ladies and men have given us some examples of how race is being used against you or someone you know. I want to kind of bring other examples. I know we kind of talked about being too dark or being too light. Is there any other examples that you guys either have faced or have seen against race being used against you guys?
I was going to mention, I know for a point in time, or rather there was a point in time where decisions regarding certain organizations, there was kind of like a conversation about the paper bag test. And for certain, fraternity or sororities, there was a saying that individuals who were lighter than the paper bag would belong to certain sororities, and individuals who were darker than the paper bag would have to go into other sororities or fraternities. And again, I think when we talk about culture, when we talk about heritage, we know that Divine Nine organizations have built their foundation on family, on community, on value. And then you, again, kind of have this two-edged sword where it's like, but are we also still reinforcing colorism? Are we reinforcing classism? Are we reinforcing, to a certain extent, racism or prejudice? And that's even another conversation, people believing that individuals who have experienced racism cannot be racist. Like, the conversation has evolved so many years. And I think that, as you can tell from everybody's responses, we've seen it, we've experienced it. And I think Jazmin really hit it on the nail. In order for us to change the narrative, we have to have the conversation. It's not something that's going to fix itself. We've seen that for years. Letting someone who is not specifically within our community try to fix the conversation for us is not going to help either. It has to be a pretty much community effort. Everyone has to put in on it to get the outcome we all know we want.
I want to turn this section back to Rochelle, because Rochelle, you're part of a sorority, and I would like for you to highlight that sorority and kind of relate a little bit about that beginning part that Lorne kind of mentioned. And if you can shed some light, if something is, private, then we definitely want to respect that. But I want you to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So I'm a part of Delta Sigma Theta, and I'm a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta. And, I'm happy that I've never experienced that in my sorority. And quite frankly, I do know, right, that there are, the stereotypes, that are part of the thought process of the Divine Nine and the things that come with it. And for example, one of the stereotypes is that, I am fair skinned with long hair. There's the assumption that I would be a part of a different organization. And I know when I became a Delta, there's just none of that stereotype that existed at my school, in my chapter. And really don't believe on a national level. It just has become a stigma with that. And I really feel like there amongst the Divine Nine is more of a community base, an appreciation of what everybody has become. So for example, when we have our Founders Day, you will see other organizations and chapters and sororities and fraternities that are, celebrating the Founders Day of another organization. And so, I think over time that, things have changed. It's not, no longer the competition amongst us all. But yeah, I think that, that was a part of our history, right? To even segregate amongst ourselves, believing that one color, should be grouped together with another. All a part again of like kind of like what Jerry mentioned is just, a system that created that dynamic amongst us, right? And so now we've had to put in the work to rebuild all of that, rebuild the community amongst African Americans in general. And now we've got to spread that out to everywhere else.
Yes, I think that's very powerful. Now, here's a tough question that I want to ask you guys. Our Black history, some of our founders, some of our, civil rights leaders have brought us freedom. Now, I want to ask you guys, do you feel like we have that freedom in today's world, or a form of it, or a form of not of it? So tell me a little bit about that.
To a certain extent, yes. I mean, of course, it's obvious that we've come such a long way. I mean, it's 100% more. We can't deny that. But not as much as we should. There's still a lot of work to be done. Still a lot of groundwork to be done. Still a lot of things that still need to be fixed, tweaked. I mean, I'm gonna be honest, when I hear people say the word freedom, I always think people think of like, oh, I can do whatever I want to do. I can wake up tomorrow and not go to work if I don't want to go, or no, I cannot. Like, no. When you're talking freedom and survival, it's a thin line between, being free and surviving, So I just think that as far as freedom, yes, we've come a long way. We can do a lot of different things, but to actually survive and thrive and be seriously equal, no, I would not say so.
That's
Too
a
many
good
things need to be changed.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. Thank you, Jerry, for sharing that. Anyone else have any thoughts in regards to this question?
I actually agree with Jerry. I wanted to just piggyback off of what he was just saying about surviving. I feel that at this point in time, we're African Americans. I feel that we are more so surviving rather than, we're just free, or we have the sense of freedom, because we do still have setbacks and things that hold us back a lot. As far as like finding jobs, or even just building relationships with other people within other races and ethnicities. I feel that at this point we are surviving, but we want to get to that point to where we have complete freedom.
Great perspective.
And
now,
to piggyback just a little bit, Marty, on that, just a smaller piece. By any means, I don't want that to come off as like, a complaint. Like, oh, you guys are still complaining about things that have been going on for years and years. No, we're not saying things anymore. Hey, it's the fact that we still have to go through it. It may not change, but right now, things are not something like, oh, I think, I'm gonna worry about this today, because I'm Black. No. It's things that for a fact that you have to, do. To say, it's a certain way you have to be, especially to be successful. This is not saying for someone who just wants to, exist or just get by. It's two different types of mindsets you have to have. Successful and to be Black in this country, you have to be a certain way.
Well, and I think in a general sense, right? Like, on paper, on our day-to-day, we all have freedoms, right? And on paper, it looks the same. I think where I, kind of take issue and question the equality of our freedom is when, what we do. For example, let's have an example. If in a criminal case, which is most often what we see, right? If, an African American commits a crime, that crime often leads to a death sentence, or that police stop often leads to a death sentence. And that's where, the law seems to change for us. And I think everybody on this panel knows, and a lot of our viewers probably already know, that I'm very pro law enforcement, that I take a lot of pride in the work that I did as a prosecutor for almost 10 years, that I've worked with law enforcement, and proud of all the individuals that I worked with and my colleagues. But yet there are still strides that we have to make with regard to our criminal law system and how African Americans are dealt with in, police situations. And so I think, if you commit a low-level crime and it, potentially leads to a serious injury or death, you're essentially taking away the system that was put into place, right? The procedures and process that were put into place in order to prosecute those crimes. And so I think on that level, and of course on others, just as Jerry mentioned, sometimes we're walking on eggshells to make sure, right, that we're treading those lines, right, and that we're not getting into positions where we won't be, potentially treated equally. And so it's a hard spot to be in, and there's still a lot of conversations that need to be had to fix those things.
Yeah, and Rochelle, I do want to have a follow-up show with you and maybe some of our law enforcement individuals that we've had on the show before to talk about that, because that is another systemic, problem that we have, and what can we do to change that, and just to change the narrative, the perception. Right now, a lot of our people are afraid, let's be honest, about the cops, what they've seen on video. So those are things that I do want to have a later conversation, because that is going to be a whole different show. But you bring up a great point. Now, I want to lighten up things a little bit. The history and impact of Black culture has changed our world. Let's be honest, okay? I want to talk about the great stuff that this race has brought to us: art, music, spiritual leaders, activists, writers, athletes, entertainers, and what we're celebrating today, which is history, okay? His story. So I want to kind of turn it over to you guys, all of you guys. Who is one person that you find influential in all of these categories, or maybe just one of these categories, but who do you guys find influential that you guys want to tell our viewers so that they can go Google the person so they can learn a little bit about them?
Well, I actually did my research, and I've been reading up on one guy. He's actually one of the first African American doctors. His name is James McCune Smith, born in 1815, died in 1865. He was actually one of the first to get accepted, but due to all the racism at the school he was at, he was forced to go to Glasgow, the University of Glasgow. He was also one of the first Black men to have a pharmacy. I never knew nothing like that, and I know there's a few other people who brought stuff to the table, but he stuck out to me because I've never heard of him. Never knew that he was one of the first people who was a doctor, let alone having a pharmacy. So that was one I was really interested in. He got married. He actually had to go through being taunted, cursed at, pretty much stones being thrown at him because of his color. But he looked past that and kept doing what he had to do in order to get to where he was. And when it got too much for him, he kind of settled down. He moved to a different place, and he got married, had 5 kids, and then, of natural causes, he died. But he paved the way for most doctors today, not just African American, but for, Vietnamese, Chinese, all the other nationalities out there. He made it to where, we can do that too. It's not just with, the Caucasian race. It's for all of us.
Yes, well said. Any others that you guys find, one person that has been influential that you guys want to bring up for our viewers?
I'm a big fan of Kanye West. Reason being is, of course, like you said, as far as influence, his influence on the African American culture for the last 20 years has been unbelievable. Not even just just the African American culture. I mean, as far as just the American culture, I feel like, hip hop and music has such a strong hold on, this country and, people. And it gets you, in a nice place of where, when you see things, you like, you can appreciate it, So Kanye West for me.
Nice. Okay. We got some new school, some old school. Anyone else?
I was going to say, because this is always a tough one, right? Because there's so many people you can pick
There's
from.
so many. Yeah.
I'm gonna say Iyanla Vanzant. I think a lot of people might overlook her impact because she has transitioned into more of a celebrity. I think for me specifically, I really advocate for mental health awareness when it comes to African Americans. So any life coach, any therapist, any counselor, I'm always going to push for people to research them. But I think with her specifically, I just like her approach. I think she blends spirituality with academia. I also think she has a very tough love perspective, which again, in the African American community, that's kind of synonymous for us. We really understand sometimes it's not going to be peaches and cream, but know that I love you. So I think for her, I've watched her go from speaking engagements to television appearances to her own show. And I think that despite the celebrity, I think that some people might miss her message maybe. But I think that for me, I've been able to really watch her journey and really, I would say, really grow on my own way with kind of just watching her.
Nice. Okay, we're going to keep going down the list. Now, Jazmin, what's the one influential person you would name?
Well, one woman who I really admire is Marsha P. Johnson. She is one of the pioneers of the LGBT community. She was a prominent figure in the 60s, especially with the Stonewall riots and everything. She was a trans activist, and I just really appreciate how she is a trans Black woman at that, who started these movements for the LGBT community. And she's definitely one of the biggest names out there who have made strides towards change in this country for the LGBT community.
Wow, that's impactful. Now, Rochelle, I know this is also a hard one for you because there's a lot of people that you are influenced by, but tell us one person that you can name.
Yeah, so I always have a hard time with this question, Marty. And so, of course, I have to throw out just a couple of names. Like, obviously, we have the common African-American, what I would call household names like Shirley Chisholm or Mary Piccolo Bethune. But one of the women that I kind of look up to right now is Beverly Bond. So she is the founder of Black Girls Rock. So, just to have someone who wants to get African-American women together to build each other up instead of, like the example that Misty and I gave earlier, the tearing down of each other, the competition. So I just love the spirit of empowerment that she brings, and just continuing to forge forward as women, as African Americans. So
awesome. Now I want to commend you guys. You guys are just a strong, powerful group, extremely powerful. So every day you should have your head up high, chest out. You guys are very powerful. But I need to ask you guys, what are each and every one of you guys doing to instill some of this change, or maybe begin the change process, or begin it in the conversation in our community? What are you guys doing?
I would say, for at least me, and I know Misty, we talk about it, we have the conversation. We push the conversation. When it seems uncomfortable, we still have the conversation. I know we literally, before we started, we were talking about field trips, that I took as a kid growing up on the East Coast, going to plantations, you know, Jamestown, Colonial Williamsburg. They took us to these places. And as a child that's maybe about 10 years old, you know, still kind of preparing for puberty, still figuring out, do I like basketball? Do I like pink or blue? You know, I'm thinking about that, and I'm having to deal with the conversation of racism, having to deal with the conversation of slavery, having to deal with the conversation of, as you said yourself, Madi, individuals being considered less than property, less than humane. So I think for us, or myself specifically, I would say that I am pushing the conversation. I'm taking every opportunity I can to talk to people, letting them know my experiences, not to make them upset, you know, not to scare them, but to let them know it does not matter where you come from. It does not matter what experiences you've gone through. There is still a light at the end of the tunnel. There is still progression that is occurring. As Rochelle said herself, legislation. We're constantly talking about updating laws, constantly talking about making developments to give us these rights across the board. So I would say I am having the conversation.
Impactful.
I wanted to piggyback off of what Lauren was saying as far as pushing the conversation. I am an avid user of social media, so I know that sparking the conversation through social media when you know that everyone's talking about it, especially when there's like a hot topic, so to speak, in the news. And I feel like opening that conversation to not only people who are in your city, in your workplace, town, whatever, talking to other people around the country, around the globe about these situations, it not only gets us aware within our country, but it also makes other countries aware of what's going on and gets them talking within their communities to see what they can do to either make themselves aware in their country or their town and educate themselves on Black issues.
Yeah. So, Misty, Jerry, and even Rochelle, I want to ask you, what kind of issues do you individually, this is opinion based, do you want to improve? There may be more than one, but we only have time for one. And we definitely understand that this is a deeper stemming problem. But what kind of issues should we start working on?
So I can share that. So first, I think I mentioned, you know, my first thought on that would be, you know, the issue with the criminal law system, and, you know, dealing with police brutality and those instances. And, you know, it would behoove, right, everyone in every instance to look into those things and investigate, and then come up with ways that we know will eradicate those issues, right? And make sure that those problems never happen again. And the other thing that I think about as well is just figuring out ways to continue passing along the communication, the knowledge that racism does exist. Because I do think that we live in a society, you know, whether they're young or old, you know, varying levels of diversity, and not everyone believes that it exists. And we see it, you know, in our lives, you know, if not on a daily, at least monthly. And so I think it's a little bit of a disregard to what our experience is and what it does to us and the impact that it has on our lives. And so I would hope that more people who believe that would have an open mind and give a little bit of recognition to the things that impact the lives of African Americans.
Yeah, I think that's great. And you said something, knowledge is power. So finding out what, I know you're saying that the rights of the law, but knowing your rights, what are those rights, right? I think that also helps us that may get in a situation, heaven forbid, right? But knowing the law and educating ourselves, all of us. I know, look at this panel. You guys are doing things every day to educate yourself, to put you in a different perspective. So I love that. Misty and Jerry, I want to ask you, is there any kind of issues that you guys want to improve on additionally to what Rochelle said?
Well, with me, I think it would start within myself, because I did have a lot of issues growing up. It started with me, and then I gradually passed that on to my kids, my son and my daughter. and getting them prepared for what they're going to go through in life as a Black woman and a Black man. And I know once they start to educate themselves, not only from what they've learned in school, but from what, I've told them and what they've gone and researched and learned, they can also educate their fellow other students and maybe some adults, because some adults don't know as well. Look at me, I'm one of the ones who didn't know very much about about Black history until, I looked it up. I went and researched, I read about it. I watched movies. The movies were a little more graphic than what I would say in a book, but I mean, it gave me a different perspective on what, my ancestors went through to get me where I am today. So for me, it would be starting with myself, educating myself, and having the knowledge to spread that to my kids, and then hopefully my kids will follow in those same footsteps and educate those around them in regards to, what their experiences are, and opposed to what everyone went through back then.
I would say, of course, the justice system would probably be the first thing. I think any of us would, want to, wave the magic wand and fix. But I got a deeper opinion on that anyway, Marty. But besides that, image, I think that's one of the biggest things that have hindered us, since it all started, as far as just media coverage, news, books, information, the image that Black people have had, up until, you're actually able to, like they say, do your own research and find these things out. You just, it's not a good look. So that would be the next thing. I feel like if the image was better, I don't want to say the situation would be better, but I definitely think that it would be, I guess.
I think Jerry, I'm following you on this because you're talking about stereotypes, right?
Right.
The image is the stereotype and what, right. And the roles, the jobs, the look, the culture that everybody thinks we're supposed to have versus who we really are.
Right.
And that's got to change, right? Like we're not going to live cohesively and equally if everybody is stuck on a stereotype of what African Americans are. And if you think every Black man is a thug, right, then every officer that approaches a Black man is going to have fear rather than knowing that that's not who we are, right? It's the stereotype of what people believe we are.
Absolutely. It's hard for, some Black men, you have to turn your radio down when you're next to someone, in traffic, and it's like, I don't want them feeling like my music's a little too loud or I'm listening to rap. So, you don't need to be profiled or stereotyped or whatever the case may be. It's on different levels, but, exactly what I was trying to say. Thank you, Rochelle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are real life situations, real life things that either consciously or subconsciously, and if it's someone that's watching right now, being more mindful of those things. Now, look, we're kind of wrapping up the show right now. We've touched on the history. We touched on racism. We talked about discrimination. That's also important. Things that we talked about like classism, colorism, sexism, religion discrimination, even for some Black women, how your hair is. Those are real life topics of discrimination. Men too, how your hair is, if it's in dreads, if it's in braids. Those are things that I would want us all as a community to be mindful of. And I know we're running out of time, so discrimination is going to be another topic we talk and kind of go deep, because this is something real that we've kind of touched on in the other topics. Now, I want to ask all of you guys, we're wrapping up the show, and I want to ask, as I always do, if you guys had to give one piece of advice, a quote, words of wisdom for those that are watching right now. And I want every single one of you guys to kind of answer, because y'all all bring different perspectives to the table. What would you tell our viewers today? We'll start with Jerry.
Don't take the good ones.
I mean, my piece of advice would be to just be mindful. Just be more mindful. Just be a little bit more understanding that every race, every person, everyone probably stereotypes to a certain extent. But just be more mindful that, if you were in those shoes, how would you want someone to look at you? How would you want someone to feel about you? Just moving forward. If it's a family member or yourself or anyone that you love, how would you want them to be treated? And just remember that.
Nice. Misty.
To piggyback off what Jerry said, and also Miss Rochelle, be open-minded. If you don't know something, look it up. Get the knowledge you need to know in regards to what somebody has gone through, what they may be going through. Definitely be understanding as well.
Yes. Lorne.
I would say, especially during the time that we're in now, have some grace, and I know it technically piggybacks off of Misty and Jerry, but have grace. I think sometimes we talk about history not repeating itself. We talk about just making sure that we are intentional with each other. But I think the most important thing people need to start reminding themselves is that you are human, you are going to flaw. So if you extend someone else grace and we all teach each other to extend grace to the next person, it'll all come out in the wash. We'll all be fine. We'll all be able to work with each other, progress with each other, and remember each other. Because that's the other part. Remember the person sitting next to you.
Yes. Okay, Jazmin, there's a little bit of you guys are piggybacking off each other. I love it. Maybe this is why we did the order. So Jazmin.
Well, some advice I would say is just to love yourself, love others, love your neighbor, spread love and spread kindness, because that's how we're all going to get along. That's how we're all going to be happy. It's just we all can be kind to each other. That's how racism will end, discrimination will end. Just be happy and just love each other and spread kindness.
Yes. Now they all correlated with each other, Rochelle. So I want you to hit it with a bang. What is your word of advice?
I mean, so for me, it's just be proud. Be proud of where we've come from. For African Americans, I mean, just we carry all of this on our shoulders, right? And we come from intelligent and creative and strong ancestors that have made amazing impacts on our lives, on the world. And still today, Misty mentioned I think you said it was one of the first African-American doctors. And, I am blown away still today that there's an African-American female who helped to research and produce the vaccines that we're using now for COVID. And so those strides mean something. And when we carry ourselves proudly, and show that and let our light shine, that, eventually that light can't be denied. And eventually people will see that. And so when you talk about like what you all brought up, the love and the grace and, the recognition and the communication and all of those things are going to happen if we're just all, carrying ourselves peacefully and being willing to have the open mind.
Beautiful. One thing I will say is share your light. Don't let anyone dim your light. I think that's powerful. All of you guys said something that just piggybacked off the other one, and it's just so impactful. So from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank all of you guys that are on this panel for allowing me to really get deep on some of these topics with only an hour window. So next time we're going to go deeper again. So I just want to thank you guys all for being on today's show.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Mommy.
Yes. Now, for those of you guys that are watching, look, these are heavy topics. But this is what we need to start the conversation and begin the healing process for our men and our women around us. This month, we have brought so much knowledge, positivity, and open conversations to discuss the importance of Black History Month. It doesn't just end this month, it's every day that we need to recognize it, right? African American individuals walk around with their skin every day, and we need to recognize that. I think that's very powerful. We want to thank this amazing, powerful panel that has brought a lot of amazing perspectives that we all need to listen, and we all need to soak into those things and be mindful of it so we can create change. So I thank all of them for joining us today. And for those of you guys that are watching, I want to thank you guys for tuning in to Talk to Me Tuesday. I would appreciate and I would love for you guys to share the show. The more you share it, the more we're spreading this change, this love, this awareness to our community around us. So I want to thank you guys for sharing it. And I want to thank you guys for tuning in to Talk to Me Tuesday on a Tuesday. I'm your host, Madi B. Until next time.